the principle of internal sovereignty, the unconquerable mind, the foundational irreducible truth underpinning all of Ryan Holiday's philosophical works, is the principle of internal sovereignty. The highest form of freedom and effectiveness is achieved by ruthlessly distinguishing between what is within one's control, internal, and what is outside of it, external, concentrating all energy on cultivating an unshakable inner citadel of judgment, character, and resolve. This principle is the cornerstone of the entire ethical system presented in the daily Stoic. Ego is the enemy, and discipline is destiny. The entire framework of personal power is built upon the synthesis of two core, inseparable concepts: the dichotomy of control, the filter, and the primacy of character, the core. A. The irreducible truth of the dichotomy of control. The single most frequent lesson drawn from the lives of the Stoics and constantly applied throughout Holiday's writing is the dichotomy of control, the recognition that the world is divided into two distinct categories: things we control, our thoughts, judgments, intentions, and reactions, and things we do not, everything else. Other people's opinions, the outcome of events, past actions, future possibilities, luck, and circumstance. The folly of externals. The first principle is that all suffering is born from the desire to control that which is uncontrollable. This is the core message of both the obstacle is the way and ego is the enemy. Ego in this context is the hubristic belief that one is special, entitled to a certain outcome, or capable of bending the external world to one's will. When the external world inevitably resists, as obstacles arise, the ego suffers proportional pain and paralyzing frustration. The work of achieving internal sovereignty is the continuous daily discipline of ceding control over externals. The Daily Stoic Journal is a practical tool for this daily surrender, shifting focus from the outcome, which is external, to the effort, which is internal. The power of judgment. The synthesis refines the sphere of control to the judgment itself. The first principle is that no external event, no matter how catastrophic, can harm the soul or mind. Only our assent to the negative judgment about that event can cause harm. The obstacle is only an obstacle because we choose to see it as one. The adversity itself is merely raw material, a neutral input. The ability to choose a productive, objective, and non-emotional judgment in the face of chaos is the ultimate act of internal sovereignty. This freedom of judgment is the core thesis derived from the fables like The Girl Who Would Be Free, Epictetus, where true freedom is achieved not by changing one's chains, but by realizing the mind itself cannot be chained. B. The irreducible. Truth of the primacy of character. The focus on internal judgment is not a passive or intellectual exercise. It is an active discipline aimed at building an unassailable inner core of virtue and ethical consistency. This is the essence of discipline is destiny and right thing right now. The virtue triad. Holiday's work consistently extracts the four cardinal virtues: justice, temperance, courage, wisdom, but the synthesis often focuses on the active cultivation of three interconnected internal states that define character: discipline, temperance. The first principle is that self-control is not a restriction, but a liberation. Discipline is the mechanism by which the mind, internal, rules the passions, and appetites, semi-internal, ensuring choices are governed by principle, not impulse. This daily practice of saying no to immediate gratification is what builds the necessary internal strength to withstand external pressure. Courage, fortitude. As explored in Courage is Calling, the first principle of courage is that it is the commitment to right action, regardless of the fear or consequence. This is not grand heroism, but the daily moral fortitude required to choose the difficult, principled path over the easy, expedient one. Wisdom, prudence. The first principle, often summarized as wisdom takes work, is the relentless commitment to objective truth and continuous learning. It is the ability to see the world as it is and to understand the long-term consequences of one's judgments, thus informing the practice of discipline and courage. Character as destiny. The ultimate synthesis of this principle is that character is the only possession that cannot be taken from us, and it is the single greatest determinant of long-term success. External success, money, fame, power, is fragile and temporary, secondary greatness. But the character developed through disciplined, principled choices is permanent, primary greatness. Discipline. His destiny argues that the quality of one's actions and the character that motivates them is the only thing we truly control, and it becomes the ultimate legacy. Right thing. Right now focuses this principle into an action bias, the continuous, unglamorous choice to execute the ethical requirement of the present moment. C. The synthesis. The unconquerable mind. The principle of internal sovereignty dictates a linear process that moves from philosophical understanding to physical reality. The filter. Apply the dichotomy of control to filter out all non-essential concerns. The action. Focus all energy onto disciplined, courageous, and wise judgments, character. The result. The mind becomes unconquerable, impervious to the chaos of the external world. In essence, this foundational principle asserts that the true art of living, as seen in Lives of the Stoics, is the continuous, vigilant maintenance of one's inner state. Everything else, fortune, fame, adversity, is a temporary visitor. The self is the permanent tenant, and its quality must be the life's ultimate project. The principle of productive adversity. The transformation of obstacles having established internal sovereignty. Principle 1. The individual is prepared for the second, higher-order foundational truth synthesized from Holiday's works. The principle of productive adversity. Every external obstacle, challenge, or negative circumstance is not a barrier to success, but a necessary, unrepeatable, and potentially advantageous piece of raw material to be used, redirected, or transformed into an opportunity for growth and advantage. This principle is the central active mechanism of applied Stoicism, most explicitly detailed in The Obstacle is the Way, but also structurally underpinning the historical narratives in Conspiracy and the lessons in What You're Made For. The entire framework of strategic execution is built upon the synthesis of two core, inseparable concepts: the three disciplines of action, the process, and the alchemic mindset, the transmutation. A. The irreducible truth of the three disciplines of action. The synthesis of Holiday's pragmatic approach to problem-solving reveals a consistent, repeatable three-part discipline necessary to transform adversity. An obstacle is only truly overcome when it has been processed through the lens of internal sovereignty, Principle 1, and then addressed through these three external disciplines. Discipline of perception. The seeing. The first principle is that adversity must be stripped of its emotional and subjective narrative. This requires objectivity, a refusal to panic, and the ability to see the situation as it truly is, not as the ego or fear would paint it. This is the application of wisdom, Principle 1, in the moment of crisis. The obstacle must be broken down into its smallest, most manageable parts, removing the overwhelming sense of totality. In the face of a complex controversy, conspiracy, the disciplined perception focuses on the handful of facts and controllable variables, ignoring the surrounding media chaos. Discipline of action, the doing. The second principle is that the response to an obstacle must be intelligent, immediate, and persistent forward motion driven by process, not emotion. When the way forward is blocked, the response is not to stop, but to pivot, flank, or find the next thing, no matter how small, that is within one's control to execute. This is the application of courage, Principle 1, and right thing, right. Now to the problem itself. The greatest danger is not the obstacle, but the inaction or confusion it inspires. Success is ultimately a matter of momentum, continuing to apply effort, consistently, to the controllable variables until the obstacle's momentum is overcome. Discipline of will, the endurance. The final and deepest principle is that the character forged during the struggle is the greatest gain of all. This is the long-term, structural benefit of adversity. The discipline of will accepts the reality of the struggle, finds the necessary internal resilience, or inner stillness, as in Stillness Is the Key, and uses the adversity as a training ground for character. The struggle is viewed as a necessary, educational experience, a tuition paid to learn a difficult lesson. The person who emerges is stronger, wiser, and better equipped for the next challenge. B. The irreducible truth of the alchemic mindset. The application of the three disciplines is fueled by a core belief that constitutes the alchemic mindset, the philosophical commitment to find advantage where others see only defeat. The advantage of underdog status. Holiday's work frequently champions the struggles of historical figures, lives of the Stoics, and modern mavericks, as implicitly explored in Growth Hacker Marketing or Perennial Seller. The first principle is that the position of disadvantage forces clarity, innovation, and economy of effort that are often unattainable in times of comfort. The constraints imposed by the obstacle, lack of resources, time pressure, public scrutiny, compel the creative, non-obvious solution. The obstacle is valuable because it tells you what you need to do and what you cannot afford to waste time on. The anti-fragile principle. Though not a Stoic term, the synthesis reveals a commitment to the concept of anti-fragility, the belief that the system or the person must be designed to benefit from stress and disorder. The first principle is that the true goal is not to avoid the obstacle, but to actively seek out challenges that, when overcome, increase the system's capacity. The struggle makes the individual better. If an artist or business faces market rejection, an obstacle, the disciplined response is to learn, pivot, and create a better perennial seller. The original rejection was not a failure. It was a necessary mechanism that sharpened the final product. C. The synthesis, the forge of experience. The principle of productive adversity dictates that life's true meaning is found in the struggle itself. The obstacles that cause panic for the unprincipled, Principle 1 failure, are merely the raw materials for the principled individual. The mechanism, use the discipline of perception to see clearly, the discipline of action to move forward, and the discipline of will to endure and learn. The result. The obstacle is not bypassed. It is transmuted into an advantage, a lesson, or an unrepeatable experience that directly builds the character required for the next level of challenge. In summary, this foundational principle teaches that life is a continuous series of trials, and mastery is defined by the skill of using every setback as a curriculum. The obstacle is the way, because it forces the individual to apply the principles of the unconquerable mind, Principle 1, in the laboratory of real-world stress. The principle of strategic stillness, mastery, legacy, and contribution. Having mastered the self, internal sovereignty, Principle 1, and mastered the action, productive adversity, Principle 2, the individual is prepared for the final, synthesized, truth of Holiday's philosophy. The principle of strategic stillness. Sustained effectiveness, true power, and a meaningful contribution to the world are only possible when external effort is channeled and renewed by periods of internal quiet, leading to clarity of purpose, profound judgment, and the creation of lasting work. This principle defines the ultimate state of mastery and is the capstone concept unifying Stillness Is the Key, the eighth habit of effective people, a common reference point for these concepts, and the various reflection guides, the Daily Stoic. The entire framework of strategic contribution is built upon the synthesis of two core, inseparable concepts: the power of quiet, the source, and the imperative of lasting work, the legacy, A. The irreducible truth of the power of quiet, in a world defined by noise, distraction, and constant urgency, the ultimate competitive advantage and spiritual necessity is the active cultivation of stillness. This stillness is not inaction. It is the deliberate absence of chaos, physical, mental, and spiritual, that allows true judgment and insight to emerge. The mental filter. The first principle is that clear action requires a clear mind. The incessant mental noise generated by fear, ego, worry, and social media, which Holiday has detailed in earlier books like Trust Me, I'm Lying, creates a fog that obscures judgment, leading to impulsive, reactive, and ultimately ineffective actions. The Quadrant I crisis work. Stillness is the strategic Quadrant 2 activity that clears the mind to allow the underlying principles, wisdom, courage, to surface. The practice of reflection and journaling, as promoted in the daily Stoic guides, is the daily discipline of physically externalizing the internal chaos to regain quiet. The spiritual anchor. The synthesis links stillness to the most fundamental aspects of character. Principle 1. The first principle is that stillness is the source of self-sufficiency. By finding quiet, the individual detaches from the constant need for external validation, affirmation, or distraction. This detachment roots the individual in their internal sovereignty, making them less susceptible to the shifting tides of fame, public opinion, or ego-driven pursuit of secondary greatness. It is the necessary renewal that prevents the system from running on empty, as seen in the sharpen the saw context. The ultimate power is not found in hyperactivity, but in the calm, unshakable certainty of the mind at rest. B. The irreducible truth of the imperative of lasting work. The internal. Quiet gained through stillness must be channeled into external action that has meaning, permanence, and service. This is the ultimate expression of the disciplined life, the creation of a legacy. Perennial seller mentality. Perennial seller frames the creation of lasting work as a moral and strategic imperative. The first principle is that the value of one's work is measured by its timeless relevance and depth, not its momentary virality or success. The discipline required to create something lasting, something of high quality, deep substance, and service to others, is directly opposed to the quick, cheap, ego-driven, and disposable nature of modern culture. The quality of the final product is a direct reflection of the stillness and discipline invested in its creation. This applies to both philosophical works and business ventures. Contribution as the final measure. The various books that address contribution, from The Daily Dad, contributing to a child's character, to Right Thing, Right Now, contributing to ethical integrity, establish the final external principle. The purpose of self-mastery is contribution and service. The disciplined life is not lived for self-gratification. Ego is the enemy, but for the benefit of others. The legacy is not the fame. It is the compounding positive impact of one's actions and work on the world. The ultimate measure of a life is whether the individual use their internal sovereignty and skill, principles 1 and 2, to increase the good in the world. C. The synthesis, mastery, and the examined life. The principle of strategic stillness dictates the final integrated flow of the effective life. The loop. Action, productive adversity, demands stillness, renewal, which refines judgment, internal sovereignty, which guides better action. The result? The individual lives the examined life, as seen in Wisdom Takes Work, where every choice is weighed against the ultimate standard of character and contribution, leading to a life defined by increasing competence, ethical consistency, and lasting legacy. In summary, this final principle asserts that true mastery is the ability to fuse internal calm with external effectiveness. The strategic stillness of the mind becomes the source from which all great, resilient, and meaningful work is generated, ensuring that the legacy is one of principle-centered contribution rather than temporary fame.